Welcome to Quietly Confident Introverts, the podcast that empowers introverted women leaders and entrepreneurs to overcome self doubt and build confidence to thrive. Together, we'll explore your unique strengths, help you create a presence in the marketplace, and build profitable, impactful businesses. It's time for introverted women to rise, and it starts right here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Quietly Confident Introverts, the podcast show that empowers introverted women in business and leadership to build confidence, harness their strengths, and achieve their ambitions. And I'm so excited that you're joining me. And for those of you who have been following and listening, I'm so grateful that you do that. And I'm so grateful for the privilege to continue to add value to you. Today, we're going to be talking about how holistic health eventually leads to holistic wealth. And you'll be glad to know that I'm also bringing along a very, very special guest on today's episode. His name is Shaun Tucker, and Shaun is a dedicated coach, personal trainer, and online fitness expert with a passion for helping individuals transform their lives. He has years of experience in health and wellness industry, and Shaun has empowered countless clients to achieve their fitness goals and unlock their full potential. Shaun's passion lies in offering insights and support to mothers on their journey to reclaiming self love and embracing a healthier, happier lifestyle. With his compassionate approach and wealth of knowledge, Shaun is committed to inspiring others to live their best lives and thrive both physically and mentally. And I can tell you that these are not just words because that is how I connected with him on LinkedIn. And when you have something that attracts you to someone and you then connect with them, and then you then find that you get loads and loads of nuggets from speaking to them. That's what happened to me last year. And at the time, I hadn't even wasn't even sure that the podcast was going to happen. But I thought to myself, whenever this happens, this guy has got to come on this show. So I love to bring to you things that I have gained benefit from so that you can gain benefit from as well. So prepare to be inspired and equipped with knowledge that propels you towards becoming your more confident and more courageous self. And stay tuned to these transformative conversations. So why not join me today in welcoming excitedly Shaun Tucker, coming to you all the way from Australia. Welcome, Shaun.
Hey, Patience, thank you so much for being here. What an introduction. And it was such a pleasure to connect with you over a year ago.
Yes, I know. And I think because one is on a journey to make a difference. And they say that there's a phrase that we use in the John Maxwell team that says, I want to make a difference at a time that makes a difference with people that make a difference. And I think the times we're living in, we need more and more people to be making a difference. And we need to do it together because together we accomplish more. You don't need people to be in a physical team. We're doing the teamwork of creating impact, helping women to achieve their confidence. And that's why, you know, I am happy that you are stepping into this space. And I want you to share with the audience how did you get into the health and wellness space working with moms?
So this was an interesting one. Thank you so much for asking the question. So it started actually back, I can go all the way back to when I was actually 3 years old, right? This is kind of the thing that sparked me to connect more with women than with men. And the reason was when I was 3, I fell off a sprung rocking horse with my tongue poking out and smashed my chin, and my teeth went straight through my tongue. We lived 30 minutes away from the nearest hospital emergency, and my mum somehow managed to, with her level of empathy, connect and remove that pain from me. I have no kind of recollection. Obviously, it was a very traumatic experience for a 3-year-old child, but I developed such a deep, empathetic, and empathic connection with my mum that when I see her go through her journey and not honor herself and just sacrifice everything at the drop of whatever's going on in her life for her kids, because I'm one of 6 children, This is why I do what I do. 14 years ago, I had a health scare. I wasn't the man I am today, who is a personal trainer who's in this health and wellness space. I was actually very, very self conscious,
Hmm.
low self esteem, low self confidence. And I just cared too much about what I saw in the mirror. And it was when I was traveling overseas, I had a health scare, which really shocked me and my life. Yeah, I was drinking in a foreign Asian country. So I'm from Australia. I was in South Korea, drank way too much and ended up blacking out. Can't remember half the night. And I woke up with blood in a safe environment. I was out with my brother and his friend and another guy, but that experience that I went through on that night and the following days, whether it was alcohol poisoning, whether I was drugged, whatever happened, it scared me shitless. And I knew that I had to make a change because I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with how I looked. I wasn't happy with how I was being. And from that moment, I decided, because I had to make my way back to Japan where we were staying for a little while longer. I don't know how I did because I felt the most awful I've ever felt. But I decided I'm going to stop drinking and make some real changes about my lifestyle and my life. And that moment of decisiveness where this is what I'm going to do, I committed. And that's where I started working on myself, got into the gym, started doing all these things. It was up and down, right? My weight, how I looked, how I felt. I managed to find a girl who was perfectly matching towards me. And we met in the most surprising location on a night out. And she's now my wife. We now have a beautiful 11-week old baby girl. And
Congratulations. Oh, wow.
thank you.
How the nights are going.
Yeah, and it's okay. We're getting plenty of sleep. She's really a blessing because what I've come to realize is now observing my wife go through this journey of becoming a mother, I can see why the maternal instincts kick in. When that baby is crying, when that baby needs its mother, it's a physiological response. Let's put aside the psychology for a second. The physiology in your body shifts, it changes, it activates, it stresses you out when that baby is crying. And this, once again, adds to the part where I'm back in my professional, I guess, personal training days of working in a gym, in a big commercial gym where I wasn't out working by myself. When I was in this kind of red ocean of other trainers and things like that, the clients that I loved working with the most were mums between the age of 45 to 55, probably when their kids were getting to that later teenage stage and probably getting ready to leave the nest. Because what I've realized is mums should be honored more. They should be celebrated more because they give so much to their kids without anything expected in return.
That's very, very insightful, especially that nothing expected in return bit. But what I like is the fact that you niched further down to work based on what you found out that you love. And a lot of people, the marketing is niche down, niche down, niche down when you start business. And yes, you need to so that you can have focus. But what happens is we all evolve. And as you evolve, what you need to be focusing on is what you really love. Because at the end of the day, most of us that are entrepreneurs um, are leaving the corporate stability space to find the freedom, not just of doing what we like, but freedom of expressing what we really love to do and nurturing that. So I like what you said about that. But I also like where you've talked about looking in the mirror, and the thing is, some of us look in the mirror and want to forget what that looks like. And I think you went for a while, even though you didn't like what you saw, you decided not to concentrate on it until there was a pivotal moment in life that created some kind of understanding that you didn't like. I think there's a lot of us that go on doing, and I like the
Yeah.
word you use, which is I didn't like the way I was being. You weren't saying I didn't like the way I was doing things or the outcomes I was getting. You didn't like the way that it was coming from the inside, because that's
Spot
what
on.
being
Yeah.
is, isn't it? So I really, really like that. And that brings me to actually ask the question then, because today we're talking about holistic wealth and how that eventually leads to holistic holistic health, and that or how that eventually leads to holistic wealth. So tell us more about basically what does it mean to have holistic health?
Well, holistic health is really, it's the connected being of who you are, right? It's not just your mental health. It's not just your physical health. It's not your spiritual health. It's everything. It's how you relate to people. It's how you relate to yourself. It's your experience of the world. That is holistic health. And if it is not in health, if your experience of life isn't pleasant, there's some element of your health, if you look out from a very kind of bird's eye view of all the interconnected parts of your holistic health, there's something not going the way you want it to. Life's trying to show you something, right? There's some form of imbalance or whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Hmm. It says that there's a saying I heard somewhere that talks about, they say you cannot have balance necessarily. What you have is managed imbalance, because at some point something shifts and you have to manage that imbalance. Do you agree with that statement, or um, is balance really truly something that is heading towards you're seeking balance, maybe you're seeking perfectionism, whereas what you need to be thinking about is how do you manage imbalance, or do you agree with that, or
It's a great question, Patience. I would say, like, life constantly is balanced, right? We wouldn't be living if we weren't balanced. It's always in perfect balance. But it's because what we focus on and where our attention goes, our energy goes. And
Hmm.
so if we're focusing on only the positive without looking at the negative, we're going to think that our life may be out of balance in a positive way, which is perhaps a really positive experience. But as we know, every action has some form of consequence, right?
Hmm.
And the third law of motion, which is every action has equal and opposite reaction. So that law itself, a physical law of the universe or of existence, states that there is always balance, but it's
Hmm.
just outside of our awareness, which is perhaps why people also would see, because it is a belief. Beliefs are not necessarily truth, they're just right and wrong. Once again, talking about duality, right? It's the positive and the negative. So there is some form of balance at every single level of life. There's chaos and then there's order. And every single level you look at, if you go one higher, you'll see, okay, now we've got order to this chaos.
Hmm. Wow. That really actually brings me, you said the key thing there, because a lot of times when I talk to clients or people or give speeches and so on, I always focus a lot on this awareness piece, on the identity piece. And you
Yeah.
said outside of your awareness, there is balance, but it's outside of your awareness. And it's great because what you're saying I can relate with, and many people might be able to relate with, in the sense that when you are under a situation of stress,
Mm-hmm.
you are imbalanced. You're going through a period of imbalance. You have neglected some things that should bring about that balance, and perhaps that thing is outside of your awareness at the moment, and you need to bring awareness to it. And the only way introverts are very lucky. I know you're on a show that talks about introverts, so maybe to a certain degree, I do talk about extroversion bias, but on this show, we seem to be introvert biased, right? So for
Yeah,
introverts, there is an internal um, knowing that we can tap into that then allows you to kind of understand where that imbalance is, or where there is the awareness is outside. You're more likely to be able to have the capability to look inwards more than extroverts would. Are you
Mhm.
an introvert? And so in your life, are there ways that you help yourself bring an awareness to things that are happening in your body to take action?
Definitely. I would say that the way I process is certainly an internal experience. So I would say that I'm mostly introverted, but
Mm,
obviously putting myself out there, there's obviously those extroverted qualities that we need to learn as, or
mm,
skill sets, I suppose we could call them,
yeah.
right?
Mm,
So, looking out and seeing what's happening in your environment is going to give you a fair clue about what's going on inside of you, right? Because it's a direct reflection. And this is why the mirror, the, the reference to a mirror, both metaphysically and physically, is actually such an important piece to looking at someone's holistic health. Because what's happening outside, direct reflection of what's happening inside.
mm,
So if you see what people don't see, people will call you crazy. But at the same token, right, we're living in a world where people are given so much freedom to kind of just let their minds go wild.
mm,
And you might start believing things that are untrue about yourself.
mm,
And the mind will start creating these things for you. So you'll start to see them outside of you.
mm. And I like, because I've been thinking a lot. A word that has come to me more recently, and I use it quite a bit, is unconscious conditioning, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that then brings me to my very key question, which is one of the things that when you explained it, it really helped me. And I want you to, what is epigenetics and why does it matter to know about it, really? Because we're talking about environment and a couple of things. And I think this all links nicely with what is epigenetics and how, why is it important that people know about it?
Yeah. Epigenetics, I might totally say this differently to how I mentioned it to you last year, patients, but I think the more evolved version will help people understand it at an even deeper level because it's more about making it simple, right? Because if we think about the environment, this is the epi part of epigenetics. It's what happens outside of you. It's where you walk, it's where you sleep, how the air is, it's how the water is that you're drinking, it's what you consume, it's everything, right? That's the epi part of epigenetics. It's the environment. The genetics, that's where you come from in terms of your mother and your father,
Mm,
right? Because no matter what's happening in the world, in the social world we live in, everyone has a mum and everyone has a dad. So biologically, there's some memory or information that's come from both mum and dad. What happens when we move into an environment where we have these genes, where we have this genetic information? Sometimes the genes get activated, right? And these activations or triggers, you've already got the loaded gun,
mm,
right? I've given you the loaded gun. Let's say it was maybe your mum and your dad. They've given you the loaded gun and they've said, here, go and play with this. And you're just a kid. I mean, you're not responsible really for that. I mean, it's so deeply unconscious to be responsible for that, right? So if something happens where you start playing with the gun and you start, I don't know, pointing it at yourself, it's like, well, this is where things like disease comes from through the genetic map of where we come from.
mm,
So your mother and father, if there's any kind of family history of heart disease, of cancers, all these kind of things, you can blame your epigenetics.
mm,
So it's the genetic material that becomes activated when you're moving through life.
Mm.
So if you're highly stressed, right, this is also an environmental condition. If you're highly stressed with work, with your family, with all these things that are going on, if the environment becomes perfect for that gene to just express itself,
Mm.
well, this is where people get into lots of trouble. They find themselves in stage 4 cancer without even having any symptoms at all.
Yes, I've heard that more recently with people. Indeed, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So it is a really important piece to someone's holistic health. But if you're obsessing as well about looking at these, I guess, things that you can go and get genetic tests, you can go and have all these genes tested and know what not to have. You can have allergy tests and all these things. But really, what you're doing to yourself, if you take it really seriously, is you're being too dead serious about life and not actually living life.
Mm.
The awareness piece is great to have. But if that awareness piece creates a lot of stress and anxiety about what you can and what you can't do,
Mm.
it's going to prevent you from living your life, right?
Mm.
The more ease you have about the way you move through life, the less susceptible you are to have these sort of genes and things activated anyway.
Yeah.
So,
So that means that um, awareness then leads to what I call leading your life. So you know that there is a genetic code somewhere that is
yeah,
activated. And sometimes, most of us, we don't know what activates that gene. We don't realize. So, take for
spot on.
example, more recently, you figure out that the biggest cause of diabetes is not food, it's stress more than food. Because if your bodies will not process food well as it needs to because of
Mm,
stress. Because if you're stressed, you can overeat. Whether you undereat, all those processes are happening behind the scenes. But most people will focus on the cutting out of the sugar or the cutting out of the food and not address the stress element of it. And that then means that because you have the genetic code and everything, it triggers it. So it's the same thing with cancer. Cancer would feed on stress, would feel because the body is not at ease. You use the word moving through life with ease. The body becomes dis-ease as a result of stress. But then it's worth sharing with us because my next question naturally moves on from this, which is the fact that most of us create stress in life for wealth. We're trying to build money. We're trying to make a living. We're trying to um, for some it's make the money to live on the fast lane and live on the feed happiness or whatever. So where you don't have holistic health, you can't have holistic wealth. And where you have holistic health, then you can think about holistic wealth. So in your view, what's the definition of holistic wealth? And how do you link it to health? And especially since you work with moms, because a lot of moms, like you said, they sacrifice a lot.
yeah.
For me, for example, in my earlier years, I had to make a decision about looking after my children. That affected my career. But when I look back now, I'm grateful for it. But at the same time, there was a time during that period as well where I was working very hard for my studies, looking after the kids. My husband wasn't around a lot, so I was a single mom. And there was also the element of I want to make my life rich so that I don't leave poverty for my children. I want to enhance my career. So if you share maybe with the audience your view of what is holistic wealth and how can we put it together with holistic health?
Well, I think it's a great open-ended question, right? Because holistic wealth is really look at wealth. It's to do with money, right?
Mm.
And the problem that people have in this space when they think about money or when they're working with money is really that it causes a lot of emotional distress. a lot of psychological stress. And sometimes this comes from your parents, how they raised you. Sometimes it actually comes from your ancestors further back. Were they hyper stressed and hyper vigilant? Did they go through a terrible survival time where there was war and all these things, right? Because this is how I would classify holistic wealth, is looking at, well, what are all the things that make up your health, right? We understand that. Well, what are all the things that make up your wealth? I mean, there are elements of having a certain mindset when it comes to wealth building. There's elements of, well, you need to survive, basically to have your bills paid on time and put food on the plate, right? Especially when you're a mom or when you have a family, all these things become quite real. And there's so many people out there struggling. I mean, I'm fortunate in Australia. There's a lot of, even though there is a lot of people struggling, there's a lot of community kind of work that goes on behind the scenes where there's breads that are donated, there's food that's donated to the local community houses where people can go and pick up if they're struggling. They can go and collect these things. But all of these things, because it's so charged, becomes really challenging. And it's the same with, I guess you could equate it to people's mental health, right?
Mm.
I would say that it's a quite similar interaction or relationship between the two, between someone's mental health and how they actually relate to wealth and wealth building and money and those kind of things. Is physically, we can hold a dollar bill, right? Or a $10, $20 bill or whatever it is. With someone's mental health, you can't. But how we treat money becomes very psychological.
Mm.
It's a transaction. You give and receive. That's this most simple understanding of how money works. It's transactional. Wealth, on the other hand, is building, like it's receiving more, right?
Mm.
It's knowing what to do with that, whether you're investing or whatever it is, however you're building your wealth.
Mm.
And I think it's so important to note that how you treat money is probably how you're treating yourself as well. It runs really deep.
Mm.
And it's just because it's so out of people's awareness of how they spend, how society is kind of making it feel when it comes to money, the kind of pressures they're putting on people with. In Australia, we've gone through, I think, 13 or 14 interest rate hikes in the last 2 years. People are really struggling to put food on their tables.
Mm.
They can't afford to pay their rents on time. And it becomes a mental, psychological game where you're just suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And I like what you said about the invisible versus the visible. So money is visible, tangible. You can you use it. Although these days with the credit card and so on, you can argue that um, the bankers would argue, or people who talk about finances always say that it's a bunch of zeros in the in the system, in a
Yeah.
computer system, and people can just add a zero and increase things, or remove a zero and take away things, something similar to that. But I guess in a sense, if you look around, you can see evidence of wealth and so on. Mental health, on the other hand, or your psychological relationship with money, those are internal. They're yours. They're things that you might have inherited, things that happened within the environment that you grew up, that you've absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
And all these things, then, when you think about it, the better you are at managing who you are in your health, the better you are at seeing what wealth or what money means, and then move on to how you use that. How you use that is also so important. If you're using it for the wrong things, when you were starting your story, you said you traveled to the Asian part, and you were using money to booze, more or less, to but it was all relating to, as you look back, how you felt about yourself, and you
Yeah.
were
Totally.
finding you were finding drugs and treatments to be able to, treat that. And I think for moms as well, knowing your worth. You said something about giving so much value, being part of a valuable, the value system of the society. Yet many moms, because it's not something you're rewarded for, you're paid for, you don't see it as wealth creation. I think I'm fortunate in a sense because when I was younger, I didn't know it until more recently, maybe a couple of like 3 4 years ago, where I did my values exercise
Yeah.
and found out that my top value is family. And I used to say then that if I had to take time off work to go look after my family would come first. I always said that, but I didn't know why. And I focused on that. And now I look back and I think, if I were to define wealth right now, I would define it in terms of my family being okay. And I made sure as a mom, while they were growing up, that they were okay. I mean, I can't control their mental health, but I worked on things like that.
Yeah.
I used to say I'll fill my children so much with love that they will be overflowing with love rather than try to go around looking for who to give them love. So when you talk about, I guess maybe share a little bit about what you do in terms of helping moms in the gym, moms with their eating to value themselves. And as a result of that, that leads to a wealthy way of seeing themselves and being. Maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that as well, because you're right. We're values led.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's unconscious, so deeply unconscious. We're just moving. We don't know why we do things, right? But it actually comes back to our values. So I think that's really important and key to note down. But yeah, leaning in on, I guess, helping these mums, right? It actually starts with, well, the movement, the physical exercises is really only a small part of it, if I'm being 100% truthful. Because the things that are causing people stress in their systems, what I realized when I was working with some pretty heavily overweight people who were working hard, they're following the diet, they were doing the exercise, but they still weren't getting much results. And it frustrated me. But I knew that there was something going on in this, these people's minds. I didn't know what it was at the time. But fortunately, when COVID came around and when the lockdowns happened, I turned myself a lot more inwards to kind of, for one, to check out what was disturbing me and what was really going on with me, to experience it. And then I came across, I guess, some answers that I didn't really know that I had the questions for until I looked back. And when I realized that these people were suffering their mental and physiological baggage, it wasn't just about what they were eating or what they were doing. It was what they were consuming from a point of view of what they've consumed in their life, not in terms of food, but more, this guy was a gamer. There was other people who were just very low self-esteem, kind of a interesting reflection of myself, right? These people were stuck emotionally. They had so much baggage that they were holding on to that the physical exercise was actually causing them more stress. And sometimes when your body is stressed out and it's already really stressed out, the only thing it wants to do is hold on to that weight as much as possible. And when it comes to mums who, they drop everything, right, to be there for their kids, to just take care of everything, basically. And when they finally have the courage to walk into the gym, when they hire someone like myself or start working out or doing whatever they're doing, the first thing, I just allow them to speak their minds. It's about building trust. I ask them, how are you? And then gradually, as people just say, I'm good, how are you? Right? I don't let them get away with that kind of bullshit of an answer. I asked them again. I had one client come in last week and kind of explained why I was doing this, but now she was understanding why I'd asked her, "How are you?" in the 3 times in the last 5 minutes. She was understanding because the power of this question is so, so important. How are you really? When you're really present with someone and what they're going through, this is why it takes a bit of trust and time for this conversation to happen. When someone really tells you what's going on in their present moment, well, it can be very, very uncomfortable for that client. They'll be very vulnerable. And it takes a lot of integrity as the person walking them through that journey. So a lot of it actually comes back to the talk, interestingly enough. It's just finding out, well, what's really bothering this person about what's happening in their life right now? Where is the stress? Where is the stress? And I guess I have a gift, I have a skill set that allows me to navigate and find where is this stress that's causing this person to be very on edge. Because it can be felt physiologically and in their head, psychologically.
Yeah. Such a powerful, it's taking me back memory lane, because after I had my daughter,
Yeah.
as a mom, I never felt like a great mom. I always just felt inadequate. And consequently, with my son, I had put on some weight. With my daughter, I exploded. I was really big. It was the biggest I had ever been. So I remember that I was wheeling my daughter past the windows of a shop, and I took one look at myself for the very first. I thought that's somebody else, So I wheeled back and I looked and I thought, "Ooh, that's me." So I was passing a shop where they had LA weight loss. It was called then. Um, they came to the UK then trying to establish the company. And I just wheeled her in and I told them that I just looked at myself, and for the first time, I'm finding the courage to do something. And they said, "Oh, it's going to cost you a couple of hundreds upfront." And that was a lot more money because I wasn't working. My husband was a junior in the role he was doing. So we didn't have a lot of money, but I was a saver. When they told me the money, I went home and I said to my husband, "I need to do this for me. I really do. And I need some money to do this. I found this place and I think it sounds extreme, but I want to do it." And he said, "Well, this is your rainy day." He said, "I've been keeping money for the rainy day, and this is your rainy day." I like how he put it. I thought, yeah, this is my rainy day. So I took all that money and I spent it, and I lost a lot of weight. I dropped 3 stone in six months. I won Slimmer of the month once. I had actually gone on holiday, my first ever holiday where I could afford, to America, and I was eating salads and doing great. And when I came back, they thought, "How can you go to America for the first time and you didn't eat everything there and you lost weight coming back from holiday? You deserve Slimmer of the month." So I got Slimmer of the month. But fast forward to a couple of, I got my first job, and the bias that women go through, I was struggling with self-esteem, so I couldn't apply. I didn't, it was affecting the kind of jobs or my application. As soon as I lost weight, there was some level of confidence that came with it. And the first job I applied for, went for physical interview. I got the job. And I had been looking for work. So that was an interesting combination. But guess what? Like you've just mentioned, and what you're really doing for your clients is huge, because I had dealt with the physical look, but I hadn't dealt with all those feelings of inadequacy. What I just transferred was being an inadequate mom. I moved on to being an inadequate staff. Fortunately for me, after maybe a year or two, my manager was very hands-on, a blessing in my life, just like you are definitely a blessing to many of your clients. And she said through the reports a couple of things. you keep asking for permission, patience, to be yourself. You keep asking, and you are so competent and capable. What's the problem? So I managed to go on a program and coaching. And that was my first introduction to coaching. And exactly the question you're asking, but in a different way. They said, what do you want to achieve from this?
Mm.
And what I said to them was, I really want to know who patience is. And they thought, oh, the woman thought, this is a tough question because I'm meeting you for the first time. So how am I going to tell you who you are? However, let's work on it. And it was 12 weeks and it combined not just the physical, because we met in a gym, we did exercises, but a core element of it is mindset.
Yeah.
So I'm presuming that, not presuming, I think that it's a blessing that you didn't let go and you've asked three times you know, in 5 minutes, because that is the key. I find myself on that journey even right now where I have to work more on how am I living my life? How have I created a business that is not in alignment with who I want to be, and how do I create that? So that brings me to kind of ask the question then, do you give them exercises to go home and do that are mindset exercises aside from, or do you just do it all in the gym? What's your process of helping people? Because obviously people might want to connect with you later to kind of say, oh, I'm a mom, these are my situation.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I do have to kind of bring it back a second, because I'm not a trained counselor or, psychologist or anything like that, right? I'm a coach. So my skill set is asking questions that allow someone to realize what it is for them that's really bothering them, and helping them understand how to move forward from that. It's not giving them any kind of tools or techniques or anything like a trained psychologist or counselor would do.
Mm,
It's more about just allowing for them to realize what is really going on.
mm,
And I think it's so important to note, because leading into that question you just asked, it's the reflection questions. And this is something that I'm building out in my programs now, because I've gone on the journey of actually offering an abundance catalyst program, which I personally had to go through, which is looking at my relationship with money, specifically the emotional attachments to money, and
mm,
what's getting in the way of someone or myself attracting clients into my business, rather than repelling people. Even though we were having great conversation, it's
mm,
unconsciously repelling people.
mm,
So through that program itself, it's all about reflection, and
mm,
then guiding people through meditations, so
mm,
that they can just understand and find it within themselves to let it go. Because once you open that space within yourself and you feel safe, you're going to be able to let it go. It's not going to have a hold on you anymore. So
mm,
I'm starting to build out the program where it's a lot more, I guess, interconnected. Because yes, the talk will get you pretty far for someone to admit what's going on for them, but they have to make a conscious decision about how they handle that.
mm,
And sometimes the conscious decision part, that requires not only action, but also confidence, right?
mm,
So they need someone to almost hold their hand through that process. And when they feel safe enough to be able to say, okay, to themselves, within themselves, when they're connected enough and feeling safe and nurtured, they can let it go.
Yeah, I
So
like the piece that has just come that says conscious conscious actions and confidence leads to unraveling unconscious repelling of wealth.
I like
Repulsion
that.
as well. I like that. So I guess we need to capture that somewhere. Conscious actions and confidence leads to unraveling unconscious repelling of wealth, and attracting wealth into your life, kind of. So that's very insightful and something that people need to kind of underline and remember, that they need to be working on. But as we wrap up or come towards the end of this, we could talk here for 2 hours and we would still have lots of value to give. But I just wanted you to help the audience to have maybe three key takeaways that they would be able to start implementing, using in their lives as they go on this journey of holistic health to holistic wealth.
Well, the first thing is it's reality avoidance syndrome. And that's probably a term that I just made up right now because there's too many people out there. We've all gone through, social trauma in the last 4 years. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened that's outside of our control that happened to us very quickly, right? And that's only just getting on the cusp of what people gone through in their subjective states. But if there's something that you've been avoiding, when you look at the mirror and you see, and it makes you feel uncomfortable, whatever it is, when I say the mirror, it's not just a physical mirror, it's also how you respond to money, how you respond to talking with people, opening up, being vulnerable, these kind of things. If you're not willing to allow yourself to be with yourself, what you resist persists. You've probably heard that before. Yeah. But what happens if it goes unchecked for too long is it becomes your personality. This is how people fall into deep states of depression and find it really hard and really challenging to get out of it for such a long time, because they have to change something about their personality or their personal reality. So are you in a reality avoidance state? So that's number one. Number two, it simply starts with awareness. You can't be aware if you're not really taking note. And it can just be a mental note, but do something to train your awareness. I do a lot of meditation and yoga, and it helps me become more aware of what's happening inside and outside. It's funny because when I feel something happening inside, it usually happens outside. I see it. It actualizes. So if you're not doing something that connects you to building your awareness and your attention and focus, well, you definitely should start.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be left behind if you don't. The third one, people think about their health in way too complex ways. Just make it simple. If you're not doing any exercise, you don't have to join a gym. Go for a walk. If it's too hot outside, nice excuse. Go for a walk outside. Put on some sun lotion or whatever you need to do. Put on some hats. Just do something. Get back to what you were doing when you were a kid. What did you used to do? Were you playing in the playground? Were you just going on walks? Were you hanging out with friends and doing that kind of thing? We tend to isolate ourselves way too much, and we have to just simplify it. What are the core needs that we're missing? People need to actively move their bodies, but don't make it too hard for yourself. Don't say that I need to have this gym membership or do this kind of martial arts training or whatever it is. Don't do what you used to do, but look back and see what you used to do in terms of what was fun for you.
That is, brilliant tips. And just so people can really take this in, don't avoid reality. Don't allow the negatives to become your personality because you're avoiding reality. That's number one. Number two, awareness. Having a mental note, paying attention. We have to be the leaders in our own lives and take the courageous steps of be a courageous leader in your own life. And the third is making exercise or health simple. You don't have to have complex barriers that make you have excuses. Just keep it simple. And as you were talking, you said becomes your personality. And I thought, wow, the word personality has reality in it.
Yeah.
It has the word reality in it. Isn't that fantastic? And we never think about it. It's about you are creating this reality and it becomes your personality. So how do you focus on making sure that you don't avoid the reality because it has the answer to the personality you are exhibiting. And for us introverts, the big one you said there was don't isolate yourself. It's so easy for us to feel like introversion is not accepted in the world. So we go and isolate ourselves even more. And the older you get, obviously, the more introverted you get. I can say that for sure for me. But
Definitely.
you have to work on it because you have to come out when the sun shines and go to sleep when the when the moon comes. You just got to live and live well, and the way to live well is to have that balance you're talking about. Balance is possible. Bringing it to your reality. There's so many rich things you've said today.
Yeah.
So we want
Thank
to
you,
say
Patience.
really thank you so much, Sean, for coming today on this show. And I know that people will rewind this and watch it a lot, a lot. Um, and obviously, for you who is listening, we have links in the notes. We have things to share from Sean that you can connect with him. Like I connected with him on LinkedIn. He's constantly sharing lots of tips there as well. His own podcast will soon be out as well, so he's available there even before you tap into so much resources from him. um so before I say goodbye to Sean, what we usually do on this show is we leave a quote. We bring out a quote and we share a quote. So I got one that I want to share with you, and it says, so many people spend their health gaining wealth and then have to spend their wealth to regain their health. So, and that's by AJ Reb Matari. So, when you think about that quote, are you
Mm,
spending your health to gain wealth? And sometimes, honestly, you cannot be able to now use the wealth to gain the health back. We know of a lot of great people who have lost that battle. They couldn't use the wealth no matter how much they had to gain the health back. So, health is just too expensive to actually spend on wealth. We need to focus on that.
yeah.
So, thank you so much, Sean, for joining me today for these rich conversations we've had. And can't wait for people to hear this as well. Thank you.
Patience, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so
Okay.
much, listeners.
Yeah. So glad that you have joined us today for these rich conversations. If you're ready to unlock the power of your introvert strengths, cultivate confidence, and embrace courageous leadership to propel your career and business forward, I'm here to guide you. Why don't you reach out to me? But also, in the links to most of the notes these days with my podcast, I'm adding a link to a quiz that I think it's a free quiz, is useful, that you start to understand what's overwhelming you, what's making your life not have ease. And it's a quiz called Navigate Overwhelm in Business like a pro. It's a quiz that will help you to understand which areas of your life are not balanced, or your business or your journey, and take the actions that you need to take. So take care and have a wonderful time. Thanks once again, Sean. Have a wonderful time, and thanks for tuning in. God bless.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Quietly Confident Introverts. If you found today's discussion valuable, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with others. You can also connect with me, Patience Ogunbona, at the Visionary Introverted Woman. Until next time, stay confidently introverted.